We want kids to come in and just know that they're home, and families to come in and know that they're home. Our children should be able to go to a festival. They should be able to go and get their face painted if they want to, not just for an hour, but for the same time as the rest of the children. It's fair and it's equitable. And the thing that's frustrating is that if you took a group of children and you told them, okay, here's recess, but Johnny gets 10 minutes of recess and the rest of you get an hour. Johnny's best friend is going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. But that's what we're doing to these kids. The grown-ups are doing to these kids, and no one sees a problem with it.
Welcome back to Finding Common Ground in the Dadability part of it. And I'm here with a guest I met through LinkedIn. I tell everybody this story that I wasn't on LinkedIn at all up until about a year or so ago. And I got on not because I was looking for a job, because I wasn't, but to connect with people that are working in the autism and disability field, and kind of pick their brains. And I learned just as much from that, reaching out to them, and hopefully they learn a little bit about me and what we do with autism. I am an autism parent, and I reached out to Rebecca a while ago, and we finally are able to connect, Rebecca. And I was wondering if you could introduce yourself and maybe say a little bit about how you got to where you are right now.
Sure. My name is Rebecca Tarrant, and I'm the founder of an organization called Autistic Youth International. We are headquartered in Charlotte, North Carolina, and we are best known for our inclusive book drives. So far, we've donated 1,300 inclusive books, and those have autistic, neurodivergent, and disabled characters in them. We've been donating them both to Title I schools and little free libraries across the country. And then we also have an annual festival in celebration of Neurodiversity Pride Day, which is our festival and pop-up market for autism. And the Neurodiversity Pride Day celebration is amazing. It's a global celebration that's in over 50 countries. So it's really great. We all have a flag. We all hoist the flag at the same time on the same day around the world. It's really powerful.
Boy, I wish you have it every year, you said?
Yes.
I wish I could attend. I actually was born in North Carolina in Jacksonville, and we were down there a couple of years ago, but I'm not down there this year. I would have loved it. When is that event?
The event is June 6th, and the festival is my baby. My annoyance has always been when I go to events and there's no kind of sensory friendly hour, there's no kind of quiet tent or anything. But then it got to be where more and more organizations start doing sensory hours, which is great. It's a step in the right direction, but it still leaves you in the position where my child gets an hour, whereas your child would get 3 hours.
Right.
So with my festival is completely free, completely adapted to be inclusive, and completely sensory friendly. We've got it broken down into 9 different zones. So for instance, the gaming zone, we have adapted remote controllers or, video game controllers that are more the Wii controllers and old school joysticks. So just things like that. And we have a full quiet zone. We have a sensory zone, just everything you would want to need. And everything is specifically designed for neurodivergent and disabled children.
Boy, that's it sounds like something pretty cool. We have 4 kids in our house. My bio son, who's autistic, and 3 other kids out of the foster care system that we adopted who are autistic, and they would love an event like that. We wish we had something like that locally. We have done some cool things locally, but it's a lot of work. It's a lot of time, and it's especially hard to I think get. We've been able to get the community involved, but sometimes it's hard to get the parents, because there's a lot of parents out there with autistic children who are neurodivergent children and other kids with disabilities who they can't get out of the house. It's a single mom and all that kind of stuff. So the challenges that we've had here, and I'm in Utica, New York area, is those kinds of things more than the fact that it's not needed, because it is needed. And when we do get the parents there, they wind up loving it. And more importantly, their children do. I wanted to talk a little bit about how long have you had your foundation or your nonprofit?
3 years, but this will be our 4th year of the festival. I decided to do the festival on my own when I heard about it from the Netherlands, and I just sort of did it. And afterwards, I went to the foundation in the Netherlands and said, "Hi, I'm Rebecca. I'm over in the US. I've been doing your festival." And they were really great about it and started supporting me. And now I am their global ambassador and their US coordinator for Pride. And it's just been an amazing ride.
Yeah, boy, that sounds great when you can get other people involved. Autism isn't just related to my house; it's related in our community. It's related all over the states and all over the country. And it's interesting. And when I got on LinkedIn, that how many people who reach out who are looking for ideas, such as the program the Netherlands are doing and you're doing. Parents are searching for this kind of thing, and so I'm so glad you guys are out there doing something like that, and you're doing the legwork. How's the attendance for that kind of stuff? And you're in a better part of the climate than we are.
We're thinking around 150 attendees this year.
That's great.
So, it kind of goes in our favor for it to keep it more intimate, because it's easier to keep it sensory friendly and all that sort of thing.
Right.
But yes, we've been very happy with the crowd that we get. Everyone is very overjoyed. They tell us how much this is needed, how much they appreciate it. The kids have a blast. It's just a good time.
Did you, how did you wind up deciding to open up a nonprofit? I mean, how did you get to that point?
Well,
as a parent, I'm sure it wasn't your career going in, right?
No, I actually went to law school, and I graduated law school and went right into law firm marketing. And I loved it. I loved it so much, and had a baby. And Jackson got diagnosed at 18 months. His official diagnosis is a level 3 non-speaking autist. He's also ADHD and he has dyscalculia. So at 18 months, I started volunteering at different organizations around the city. And I would go from one to the other, and I just couldn't find the right fit, because so many of the organizations in our area are very focused on deficit-based thinking and very much about how autism is disease and autism needs a cure. And that's not where I was in my journey. And that's not the narrative I wanted to tell my child. So part of it was that. Another part was that my son was bringing home books from school every day to read with us as homework. And I realized after a few months that there weren't any diverse characters, no disabled characters, no neurodivergent characters, nothing. So I went to the school board and I said, we really need representation. They said, well, we can't afford that. So it was partly not fitting in, partly, wanting to get the books in school. And then the other part was the Neurodiversity Pride Day Festival. And it just got to the point where I realized if I want to do all these things, I need to be a nonprofit, especially if there's going to be money flowing around and everything. But I really wanted to build a space where people could come and it could be a positive, strengths-based, inclusive environment, and not something where everyone sat around crying and saying how awful autism is.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting. My son is 36. We didn't know what autism was way back then, and so the struggles I had to go through. And then some of the provider agencies, they mean well. They tried to accommodate certain things about him and some of the other kids that have come through our house with autism. And like you said, unfortunately, I don't know if they're using textbooks to try and figure some of this stuff out, or they're trying to wing it with some of these kids. But they certainly weren't person-centered with my son, and person-centered with the other kids that have been in our house. There wasn't things that were going on. That is one of the reasons I built a barn for my kids, is because I knew what they liked, and it was the 4 kids are all different on the spectrum, and I knew what they liked, and I wanted to build something that they could go to and not go to an ARC or one of the other places where it's really cookie cutter. Everything's the same. My kids didn't fit in a lot of those programs in my home, and I would imagine you probably we probably think alike in that direction, because I would rather have my kid have a quality of recreation or quality of life that I chose, and he helped me choose by the way he is over somebody else doing it because they read it in a book and they think this particular model works, and I've seen it too many times where it didn't, and then they wonder why the child might have behaviors or something. It's not that he's having behaviors; he just doesn't want to do what they're trying to cookie cutter him into.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and the same problem goes with schools. My son, for instance, has what's known as a spiky profile. And that means that he excels in certain areas and significantly lags in others. So my son is an artist. He can make amazing, beautiful art. So he excels in that. But can he bathe himself? Can he drink out of a regular cup? Can he communicate? No. So he would be more, profound. But at school, they don't focus on his strengths. They yell at him for drawing. He's supposed to be doing his worksheets. They don't understand that he listens best when he's drawing, when he's creating. And instead of working to those strengths, all I ever hear and all he ever hears is how bad he is and how different he is. And that's terrible for a child's self-esteem.
Right. Yeah, we had a young man that came to our home. I think he got here about age, I want to say probably 12, 13. And he was blind. He was autistic. And he winds up staying in our house long enough in the process that we had to look for something for post-school because he didn't like school. And again, just like you said, they were trying to make him do, and here he was blind, which is another thing on top of the autism, another barrier. And he just didn't enjoy it. And after the people that were surrounding him, the caseworkers and his team that was around him at the time, they brought him to a blind workshop and they thought he was going to count pencils the rest of his life. And he didn't want, I brought him down there. He didn't like it. He came back and told me, what he wants, where he is now? He's doing art. I got him into a fine arts program at one of the disability provider agencies here. He's been there ever since. He draws pictures, and he's sold some of them in some of the events that they've done. And he's got one heck of a quality of life because he's doing exactly what he wants to do. And I can't imagine how unhappy he would be if he was counting pencils and putting them in a box all day long. And again, like you said, your son's creative. He should have that outlet. The young man, James, that was in our house, he should have that creative outlet and make it more person-centered and more quality-centered to what they want to do than normally. They all can't, if there's 20 kids in the class, that they're not all going to want to do the same thing with autism. And yet, a lot of times they do that in the schools, and I've seen it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Do you, where do you see your nonprofit? I mean, are you looking to expand? Are you looking to add more services to what you're doing?
Well, we were Autism Kids, and about 6 months ago, we rebranded to Autistic Youth International because we have partnerships in the Netherlands with the Neurodiversity Foundation and also partners in Uganda. So when we did that, I expanded our service area to include teens and young adults, so through what would be considered college age. So I'd like to continue to spread internationally. I really enjoy helping, like in Uganda, we kind of adopted, quote unquote, a school for the disabled with 12 students. And we provided them with inclusive books and pencils and all the things that they would need to get an education. And that was amazing to see the pictures of the first time they held a crayon or something like that. And just beyond that, there's so much that needs to be done here and internationally to make the world more inclusive and to make it more neuroaffirming. And I think that the more countries we can touch and the more people we can touch, the bigger impact we'll have, and maybe the change will happen.
Yeah, here in New York, we have quite a bit of services for autism. I can't imagine in some of these countries, they probably have the bare minimum of help and provider help around them. So I'm sure they appreciate what you guys are trying to do. I do know that in the transition, you're picking a good market going forward, I think, with going at, because the transitions for a lot of these kids is not there. They get out of high school. There's no transition really. And they have all these agencies, and there's not a lot of them doing transitions into adulthood and transitions into maybe some kind of a job or career. And if they have, issues with mobility and stuff like that, it's just not there. And we've had kids in our home that have aged out, and if they don't get the services around them, they struggle. And so I'm sure a lot of people are going to appreciate what you guys are doing. I certainly think it's global, and whatever you guys can do to help that transition piece for those teens and college age level young adults, I think is great.
Mm-hmm. One of the things that we try to do is catch the autistic people that fall through the cracks. And one of those big cracks is once you graduate high school. After you turn 18, what happens?
Right.
So that's, part of the reason we help that group. Another group that we help, and you and I had talked about this the other day, is that we do a lot of unhoused outreach. Because there are a lot of people when I go out there that I meet that are autistic. They'll either tell me they're autistic or they'll be visibly stemming where you can tell. So we do a lot of unhoused outreach. And then we also try to reach out to the LGBTQIA plus community, the trans community especially. There are a ton of trans autistic people. So we really want to, there's some organizations that want to focus on kids, the cute kids that don't have behavior problems.
Right.
And that's all they do. And we don't want to do that. I mean, we want to help those that have behavioral issues or can't speak or, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, we wound up, when you do foster care, most parents go in doing foster care looking for a baby, like you said, a cute baby and all that kind of stuff. And I remember telling my wife I didn't want any roadblocks, any barriers. I just wanted anybody between 0 and 20. And we wound up being a therapeutic house, which means we took the kids that had behaviors and and a lot of autistic, a lot of nonverbal kids, and we're one of the few houses in our whole probably 5-county area that took children. It's probably why so many kids have come through our home, because a lot of parents, the foster parents that are out there, just don't take those kinds of kids. But it gave me a lot of experience, and it gave me a lived experience that I couldn't get out of a book. If I'd gone back to school, I couldn't get the experience that I got. I learned more from them than they probably learned from me. And
Right.
it was so appreciative. And you wind up realizing that every one of them have strengths beyond. I could tell you stories all day long, Rebecca, about some of these kids, how brilliant they are in certain things and their specialties and what they are good at. Brilliant things going on. And if nobody ever taps into that stuff, it doesn't get seen. And I would imagine in marginalized communities, it's probably worse because they're not seen probably more than anybody. So I think it's they're going to be a whole lot of kids going to be appreciative of you looking at those children and young teens and adults coming through, even if they're LGBT individuals.
Yeah. Well, representation and lived experience are so important. Along the way on my journey, about a year ago, I got diagnosed as being autistic. I had self-identified as autistic for a while, but it took a while to, get tested and all that sort of thing. So my nonprofit is the only one in Charlotte that is founded by an autistic person and is all autistic people. So many autism organizations don't have any autists on their board, no autists in leadership, and there's no lived experience element. There are many advocates, like Autistic Self-Advocacy Network, which is one of our affiliates, that they believe that there shouldn't be any organizations unless they're majority autist-led. Some people feel that very strongly. And I mean, I don't know that I would say every autistic organization has to be all autist-led, but I think that there's an authority and there's a knowledge there that is beyond valuable. It's priceless.
Yeah.
And it just can't be substituted. You can't, like you said, you can't learn it out of a book. You just can't.
I can't even begin to tell you how many decisions were getting made on the children in our home and the young adults in our home, and even some of the adults with autism in my community, decisions that are made and they don't have any say in it. None of it. And I think you're right. I've pushed myself on the boards in my area so that I can give lived experience and actual be able to tell the stories to people who may have never ran into somebody that was nonverbal or was profoundly autistic or whatever. And I think you're correct in saying that we have to have representation in every aspect of these children's lives or nothing changes, because it's us as parents and these individuals. And I'm hoping that the 4 kids, if I teach them anything at all coming through my house as our kids, that they become self-advocates and speak up for what they want in life and all of that is in whatever communication needs that they may be able to portray that, because one of our kids is almost nonverbal. He says a couple of words, but it's basically nonverbal. I want him to be able to communicate. I want somebody to understand him and let those guys be at the table. I want my son, who spoke recently at an event for the first time in public. He got a chance to speak about at ADA Day, and I hope that he's able to do that down the road. And I'd like to see him get on a board, because I think it changes whatever else is going on with the board. And I've been on some of them when I first got on. They were loaded up with professionals, lawyers and doctors and all that kind of stuff. And I'd be the only parent in the room with any kind of lived experience. And then over time, I could shift narrative, so to speak, into something else in a different direction because of the stories I was able to tell. And so they could have a better understanding of maybe the direction the board should go in supporting that agency. So I'm with you. I think that parents need to be involved. I don't know if we ever get to the point where, these nonprofit agencies are completely run by autistic individuals. It would be nice, but I think realistically, if we can get representation on all of them. We have 143 nonprofits in our area, Rebecca, in like a 5-county area in the middle of the state. And I would bet that other than a few parents on them, there's nobody else with autism on these boards. And that shouldn't be.
Yeah, especially when you consider that 15 to 20% of the population is neurodivergent.
Right.
It's almost aggressive when there's not, at the very least, a neurodivergent person, if not an autistic person. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think the numbers are low. They say 1 in 31 or something is autistic. I actually think those numbers are low, and the reason I say that is because we have kids that come through our home that have not even been diagnosed with autism that I know they have it. We have a lot of lived experience. I know they have it, and yet I can't get the testing done because we have wait lists for 1.5 to 2 years, and so they're not even counted yet. And I think there's a lot of adults that have it that haven't been tested. My wife says I'm one. I don't know. I guess I'll leave that up to maybe trying to go get tested sometime, but I may be too. And I think there's a lot of people I think those numbers are a lot closer than 1 in 31. I don't know where, but I'm pretty sure it is based on what I've seen.
Absolutely. And the experts agree with you, especially when it comes to women and minorities. They're historically misdiagnosed or undiagnosed. They're not taken seriously. And like you said, with the influx of information and our new awareness about autism, a lot of adults were diagnosed with depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or whatever the case may be, and did not get that diagnosis until their children were diagnosed. I would have never thought autism unless Jackson would have got diagnosed. Now, I've been to doctors throughout my life, and I've received different diagnoses. And every time I've said that, but that doesn't capture it. There's something missing, like that. It's not a good fit, but they kept cramming that square peg in the round hole, you know? So I just felt like as a woman, I was being gaslighted and no one was listening to me, but I never thought autism.
Yeah, I can see why you would think that. We've gotten, when a child comes in our home that we believe he's autistic, we bring him to the doctors. They say in his behaviors, wait. But the longer we wait, we can't put the right supports around them, because the supports for somebody that's a kid who's just behavioral or has trauma or something, it's a lot different than somebody has the characteristics of somebody that's autistic. And I think it gets missed a lot. And what happens then if they're behavioral and they met them up, they push these meds on these kids, and I wind up taking them all off. And I wind up sometimes have to go to court and have the judge help me remove the meds, or at least discontinue them at over time, so there's not adverse effects. But and then they find, you know what happens? The kids are a lot better because they're treating the autistic kid as a behavior kid with meds for behaviors, instead of understanding that there might be something else going on, like you said.
Yeah, so many of the behaviors that you see are manifestations of dysregulation. You know, you can't medicate or treat or cure a neurotype. And autism is a neurotype. You can give supports and that person can start thriving, sure. But it's not the same as saying, well, I gave my son X pill and all of a sudden he's less autistic. You know, that's just not the way it works.
Yeah,
that's the way a lot of people think it works, because the behaviors might decrease.
Rebecca, we've had 5-year-old kids that we knew were autistic, and we wound up proving that in the end, who were on 5 or 6 narcotics. And because they're trying to treat what they're calling behavior, which really wasn't. And when we get them off these meds and we put supports around them, and we figure out a way that we can regulate what's even the nonverbal ones, what they are really communicating to me about, then we can fix a lot of that stuff. But you can't fix them when they're loaded up with meds and somebody's misdiagnosing them, and somebody's saying, it's a behavior and he's always going to be like that. And we've proved them differently, and I'm glad you're out there trying to say similar message that we have to give these kids a chance to be who they are, and put things in place that surround them that are beneficial to them, and not somebody, their own curriculum, their own agenda, and everything else.
Well, for instance, my son was going through a period of self-harm where he was banging his head. And because he couldn't speak, it was frustration that he couldn't get any words out. So once he started writing and using an AAC device and also using his art to communicate, he stopped. And he does elope. He elopes at any time, but it does happen more often when he's distraught. And I've had doctors say, well, you should put him on Valium, or you should do this, and put him on all these heavy drugs for elopement. And I've never heard of such a thing. You can't just, every time there's a behavior in a child that is problematic, you can't just throw a pill at it.
Right. Especially
autism. It's mostly environment a lot of the times.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's interesting you mentioned headbanging, because we just adopted a kid who literally just turned 18 on the 17th, and he's a headbanger to this day. But you know what regulates him is we could have a therapist there with a master's degree working with him in-house. We could have a case manager here with a master's degree working with him. They can't get him to stop headbanging. And you know what's simple that works in our house? Mike, you want to go in our autism barn? He stops immediately. And I think I'm some kind of rocket scientist that, I got some power over this kid. No, that's what he wants to do. And I smirk when I see some of these highly educated people that can't figure it out. Again, right out of school and all that kind of stuff, and they don't have the experience anybody else has, and so they think the answer is just to go and talk to him and do some kind of, clinical evaluation right there in his bedroom while he's headbanging. He's not interested in that. He wants to go out in the barn.
Yeah, you should never try to do any kind of intervention or any kind of help when a child is in distress, especially if they're in meltdown. Because people tend to think of tantrums as the same thing as a meltdown. That is wildly different. A meltdown is when the plane is going down and the engine's on fire. When an autistic child is having a meltdown, that should be seen as a serious medical situation.
Right.
Your concern should be their mental health, their physical health. Are they going to start hurting themselves? And one of the things that I just cannot stand is when people talk about how embarrassed they are when their child has a meltdown in public. And to me, that's just so insane, because I would never say, oh, you never guessed what little Johnny did. He had a seizure in public and I'm so embarrassed.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? And people want to turn it into, oh, well, he had a meltdown and I just can't do anything with him. No, they're dysregulated. They're going down. They're in pain. They're in trauma and they need your help.
Yeah, we've seen quite a bit of that. The looks that we get as parents of somebody that's in one of those crises, and we get the look like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What are you going to do? And we're not going to do anything. We're certainly not going to. We're certainly going to make sure he's safe, but we're not going to intervene to the point where we make things worse. And I think too many times they make things worse.
We were at a restaurant. We were on vacation. We ordinarily would not go to a restaurant like this, but it was more of like a sports bar. Right. So there were tons of TVs, and Jackson was getting really upset, and he was starting to stim at himself and make noises. And this woman comes up and she says to me, if I acted like that when I was a kid, I'd get spanked. And I was like, you cannot spank autism out of a child. He's reacting to his environment. He's not, yipping and yelling and things to cause disruption. But it's just that idea of when people see an autistic child misbehaving, they think, oh, that would never be my child, or my child would never do that. Well, you don't have that experience. You don't understand the depth of what they're experiencing.
Right. It's interesting. We've had whole teams of a whole department of professionals around some of our meetings that we have with these kids monthly and in their offices. And when I tell them some of the things we've done with these kids, they can't believe it. Like, we've taken them camping, we've taken them to hockey games and baseball games and football games, and they say, "What? What do you?" We take them if there's an issue. Oh well, but they get a chance to do a lot of stuff. What happens over time? We get less of that, and they get more comfortable with that. And I remember them telling me I actually had to go to the county and get permission to take one kid camping for 8 days. That was in foster care, was autistic, and this kid had a fantastic time. If it was up to them, he never would have gone. But he just thought, he can't do it. He's autistic. There's no way he can do it. That kid, we still have pictures in our house, and he wound up going back to his grandmother's. But he did fantastic on that trip, and he had such a good time. And if we don't put our children in these situations, how are they ever going to be able to adapt? And not just that, but others to adapt to them. You know what I mean? And how they are, and let them learn too with the awareness.
Well, that's part of the importance of our festival, is that we want kids to come in and just know that they're home, and families to come in and know that they're home. Our children should be able to go to a festival. They should be able to go and get their face painted if they want to, not just for an hour, but for the same time as the rest of the children.
Right.
It's fair and it's equitable. And the thing that's frustrating is that if you took a group of children and you told them, okay, here's recess, but Johnny gets 10 minutes of recess and the rest of you get an hour. Johnny's best friend is going to say, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. But that's what we're doing to these kids. The grownups are doing to these kids, and no one sees a problem with it.
Right. We're wrapping up. We're usually about 35 minutes with this. So is there anything else you'd like to add about your nonprofit, yourself, or any other closing comments that you'd like to put forward?
Yeah, I would just like to close with letting everyone know that, autism is a neurotype. It's not anything to be scared of. It's not a curse. You're not doomed. There's a good chance for a beautiful life for every autistic person. And they just need the supports, and they need society to support and include them. And that's all it is. I really appreciate you having me on.
Well said, Rebecca. And as a parent of multiple kids with autism, I appreciate you being out there. I think it's noble that parents can pay it forward, so to speak, and you're doing that through your nonprofit, and you're doing it with your awareness and your event and your festival. Keep doing out there. Maybe next year I'll convince my wife to bring all her kids down there to attend the one next year in North Carolina. Yeah. So, but you guys have fun. I'm sure those kids are going to have fun, and good luck with all of that. Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Rebecca. Have a great day.
You too.
Till next time.
Continue the conversation by joining our Facebook group. If you're a fan of the show, please join our supporters club. Subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your favorite listening app, but most of all, share it with your friends. Just one more click or comment can make a huge difference and help us to continue finding common ground.